I just think Apocalypse is it over now because it's been going on for about 3 hours.
I'm not the judge, so I'm just throwing that out there.
I didn't realize we were doing diss tracks.
Oh, mate, that is the thing that sticks out to me more than anything in this film. It is overwhelming, this shot. Hello, my name's Jack Howard and welcome to The Screen Test, the show where we take 3 of our favourite movies and make them battle it out to decide once and for all which one is the best one. And joining me as always is chief film critic at The Independent, Clarisse Loughrey, 1/3 of the Cyber Nerds, Joe Ikhinmwin, and this week we're joined by Paul Tweddle, aka Heavy Spoilers. Nice little wink there.
Just for all the fans out there. They're both of them.
War. What is it good for? Making movies out of, as it turns out. And Prime Video has a number of classics available to stream right now, including Saving Private Ryan, 1917, and The Imitation Game. War movies cover such a broad range of conflicts and events, so it's quite a ripe genre to discuss. But what are your favourites? And how do you feel about war movies in general, actually? Because I've noticed recently I find them a bit hard to watch.
Yeah, and I think a big thing about war movies in general is that a lot of the characters are quite relatable. So, for example, the film I'm talking about today, the main character used to be a teacher, and then he's just been drafted into this war. And it's kind of seeing people that you would encounter in day-to-day life and then sort of putting yourself in the same shoes as them and kind of seeing how you'd handle this alongside them. And there's a real sense of camaraderie, I think, with war films. You know, there's a feeling of this band of brothers, and when they start dying, inevitably, it really hits home a lot harder.
I mean, you're talking about. I mean, introduce the film that you're going to be talking about. Actually, let's do it. Let's do that.
Yeah, Saving Private Ryan, which is about Saving Private Ryan. So it does what it says on the tin. It's not like these other war films that you hear about where they have ambiguous titles. We're Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Joe, what have you picked and what are your feelings on war? You've come appropriately dressed.
Yeah, I thought it was appropriate. So, I picked the 2009 Iraq War thriller, The Hurt Locker. I'm not super into war movies, but The Hurt Locker's always been a movie that I watched, and I feel like it really resonated with me, and I just really enjoyed it for as much as you enjoy war movies.
We've got 3 very, very different war movies. Clarisse, what have you picked?
Yeah, so I have very complicated feelings about war movies because I think it's such a tricky thing to approach and a thing to pull off because you've got to reach that balance of honoring the sacrifice and honoring the bravery and, you know, honoring the fact that these were real lives and real people who suffered, who did incredibly brave things, who took risks. But on the other side, it's like the second that you start to craft like a hero narrative, it can get into really dangerous territory where you start glorifying it and where you start putting people on pedestals. And in a sense, it's sort of, I think that detracts from the sense that war is senseless. Like, that's the really awful thing about it. It's like what is so great about the opening of Saving Private Ryan, it's the idea that, like, it's down to luck, and that's the really sinister thing about it in that situation. It's like, are you in the right moment, standing in the right spot? And when we talk about bravery, it's like you want to honor the bravery of the people who survived and the people who saved people and the people who did incredible things, while also acknowledging that in war, not everyone had the chance to be a hero. Not everyone has the chance to be a hero because it is senseless. The brutality just comes out of nowhere, and like death is just always around the corner, which is what I find so frightening about it. So the movie that I picked is Apocalypse Now because I think it is such a complicated movie, and it has created so many narratives about, you know, what it means to be an anti-war or a pro-war movie, and what does it say? Is it glorifying war? Is it showing the horrors of it? And I guess I at least appreciate the complexity of it, and I think that's what really attracts me to Apocalypse Now.
I think that the 3 of them are very, very different. I think Apocalypse Now feels like a journey into the underworld, and The Hurt Locker feels like almost like a documentary-esque exploration of a more modern war and the psyche of a very particular soldier. And then Saving Private Ryan is this Spielberg look at what it would feel like, really, I mean, the closest you can maybe get to it using cinema, of what it would feel like to be in war. And I think that that's what, especially the opening sequence of Saving Private Ryan does. It puts you in the thick of it. So we have Saving Private Ryan versus The Hurt Locker versus Apocalypse Now. Okay, the first round is the IMDB rating round, where we're going to see which of your films is rated the highest and the lowest. What do you think is going to be the highest rated on IMDb versus the lowest rated? Does it feel kind of obvious of what's going to be in the lead?
I feel like Apocalypse Now is going to take the lead.
You think so?
Yeah.
I feel like older movies always have a better chance. So I'm going to go with Apocalypse Now.
But The Hurt Locker won Best Picture at the Oscars.
It did, but it's a modern movie. There's going to be so many people who it is in the front of their mind to downvote it. And this is why I feel like classical movies always rate higher. So I'm going to go Apocalypse Now, Saving Private Ryan, and then The Hurt Locker last.
Clarisse, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Apocalypse Now, probably because it is such a cemented classic. I mean, it's just straight up considered one of the greatest films of all time. I think probably Saving Private Ryan after that, because it's verging onto that territory. I think maybe we'll see in like 10 more years.
Paul, do you agree?
Yeah, I do, yeah. I think probably as far as, the way that these movies are viewed almost in a critical light, that Apocalypse Now probably is at the top in terms of IMDb scores, because, it is older. There is sort of, the older films get and the longer that they stand the test of time, I think the more kind of highly regarded they are.
Right, okay, if you all think that Apocalypse Now is the one to beat, let's find out what the score is. Alexa, tell me the IMDb rating for Apocalypse Now.
Apocalypse Now has an IMDb rating of 8.4 out of 10.
8.4.
Saving
That's
Private
not
Ryan.
bad.
Can I
Right.
change my choice?
Do you think that Saving Private Ryan can beat that?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it can.
I think
Okay.
Saving Private Ryan probably have 9.5 or something, quite
No.
high up.
I'm getting an 8.7.
No.
Okay.
I think an 8 around 8.7 sounds right.
Okay, we've got 8.7. Going once, going. All right. All right. Let's get The Hurt Locker done then, because if we don't think that that's going to be beating an 8.4. Alexa, tell me the IMDb rating for The Hurt Locker.
The Hurt Locker has an IMDb rating of 7.5 out of 10.
7.5.
Expected.
Yeah. Okay, so 8.4 to beat. Alexa, tell me the IMDb rating for Saving Private Ryan.
Saving Private Ryan has an IMDb rating of 8.6 out of 10.
Ooh, quite close. Very close.
Close. 8.6. It's not much
Yeah.
on 8.4. It feels like
That was
maybe
me
we should just
before
go and
the
vote on it now.
Yeah, I was on the episode just
People
voted up.
just love Tom Hanks. I feel like Tom Hanks probably.
Okay, so the scores as they stand right now: Saving Private Ryan has 3 points, Apocalypse Now has 2, and The Hurt Locker has 1 point. Okay, the second round is cast. So talk to me about Tom Hanks. Yeah, let's start with Tom Hanks in Saving Private Ryan.
Tom Hanks. You start off as well with this old guy, and I tell you what, yeah, you forget Saving Private Ryan has a bit of a twist in it, because the old guy at the start, you think that's
You think
Tom
it's
Hanks.
supposed to be Tom Hanks?
Because
Yeah.
it looks a bit like him, and it cuts to him on the boat. Anyway, old guy's in it next to Tom Hanks. You've got Tom Hanks, Woody, the guy from Philadelphia, Tom Hanks from the movie Tom Hanks. You've got Matt Damon, who's getting saved, Vin Diesel.
Vin Diesel, yeah. When I
Yeah.
rewatched this for this podcast, I forgot that Vin Diesel was
Yeah,
in this
Vin
film.
Diesel.
I think,
Had quite a
isn't
bit.
it? Didn't Vin Diesel just send Spielberg a letter, being like, "I love you and I love you. I think you're amazing," and then he put him in the film. I don't know if I'm making this up.
That
Yeah.
or if this
sounds
is
like
just-
something Vin Diesel
Sounds
would do.
like
Yeah.
But if you got a letter and the name on it was Vin Diesel and you didn't know who that was, you think that's quite a cool name.
Yeah.
I'll put him in the movie.
And Tom Hanks as well. He never phones it in, but he's so good in this.
Yeah, and he's very relatable as well. That's what I'm saying. You can totally put yourself in his shoes, because he just carries sort of a down-to-earth feeling throughout the entire thing. And he's in charge of all these other soldiers, and then he says that he's a teacher, and you're just like, you're just not cut
Oh,
out for
yeah.
this job. You've been totally stitched up here and put in charge of all these people and their lives. And yeah, you're just not cut out
It
for
feels like a little bit of a cliche from movies now, but I'm assuming Saving Private Ryan kind of it was an original thing. But the idea of like, I'm not going to tell you my backstory for a long time, like not wanting to get too personal, not wanting to connect with the people around him. You're right. It's a very relatable thing.
And he's clearly affected by what's going on as well, because they often have where his hands.
Yeah, the trembling
shaking.
hand.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, and this film wouldn't be what it is without Tom Hanks leading the charge as well.
No, and I tell you why he's had such a good career, because he's the best.
Joe, what about in the Hurt Locker?
All right, in the Hurt Locker, we don't have anyone as renowned as Tom Hanks, but we do have Jeremy Renner, who I would say is one of his best performances still to date. He was nominated for Best Actor for it. It's also starring Anthony Mackie, which was his first movie that kind of got him any kind of critical acclaim. And I feel like these two characters kind of, I'm gonna throw in Brian Timothy Gariffi. I hope that's how I pronounce his name, but I feel like these three characters together guide you through this whole movie. Each of them is very different in their take on the war and how the war affects them, and I feel like you kind of relate the most to Anthony Mackie's character, who is a sergeant who's in there and just wants things to get done right. And when Jeremy Renner's character comes in, who is risky, who is the main character but isn't likable, is sort of the anti-hero, you could say, we've got to deal with him. And it's like, it puts you in a tense position because we're following him around while he puts people in danger in scenarios where everyone's in danger already. He's supposed to be the person you're looking to keep us all safe, but he's pretty much on the edge. And I feel like Jeremy Renner does a great job in displaying that unhinged type of kind of calculated disregard for everything that's going around. So
It's the film opens with the quote, "War is a drug."
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, we're going to get into the spoilers of everything here. Like, there's no holding back. But there's a moment when he leaves the war and goes back. Okay, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah,
I don't want to tread on your points,
Oh.
Joe. But yeah, I agree. I think that Jeremy Renner is incredible in it and displays that war as a drug thing very, very well in his performance. Very, very like understated.
He's, like, really unlikable in a way that feels grounded. Like, I feel like I recognize that person. Like, that just sort of, I don't know, I think the way that he molds the arrogance, so it's subtle, but you kind of feel this baseline irritation with him while having a respect for what he does. Like, that's really hard to pull off.
Yeah,
He has a death wish, really,
he's
doesn't
putting his life on the line every time he goes out to save everyone, but at the same time there's like almost a disregard for the rules and regulations of how war is supposed to be conducted, which is one of the most sacred things when you're, when you've got other people's lives in your hand. And it's crazy how well he pulls it off. And I don't even know if I would call it arrogance. It's just, I don't know. I just feel like he is just a piece unhinged. And this is, like Jack was saying, this is his drug. Like, this is his fix. And every time he goes in, he's trying to get off, and he's not thinking about anything else other than that.
All right, Clarisse, Apocalypse Now.
Well, where do you want to start? Marlon Brando? Martin Sheen?
I think let's start with Martin Sheen, since he's in it for most of it and Brando's in it for about 2 minutes.
That's fair.
And then in the 2 minutes, you can't see him for most of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it's so good. Like,
Stop moving the
like
lights.
A monster creeping out of the shadows. What's interesting about Martin Sheen is that originally they were going to have Harvey Keitel. And there's kind of differing stories on this. Some people just say that Harvey Keitel left because of a contract dispute. But I think Francis Ford Coppola tells the story, which I find really interesting, that Harvey Keitel was like too present in the moment and kept being too like reactive to things. And what he was really looking for in that character is someone who would be constantly absorbing the trauma, which is what Martin Sheen does so well in this. Like, he's such a still kind of passive character, and yet he is at the center of everything. And you're always kind of watching him and how he's reacting to things and kind of wondering, oh, is he gonna crack? Like, is there gonna be something?
Especially because at the beginning you see him
Yeah, like he's already
a bit nuts.
crossed a kind of line, and so you're sort of constantly waiting for the next line to be crossed, and yeah, I think it's interesting because it's a film filled with like very flashy performances. I mean, Dennis Hopper is like Dennis Hoppering all over the place, and like Lawrence Fishburne, who was 14
that was mad
at the time
of
this, or when he was cast, and he is.
And let's
like,
not forget that
incredible.
adorable puppy.
That puppy, and then the puppy is probably dead. It's really sad.
Yeah.
Harrison Ford as well.
Yeah, Harrison Ford pops up.
That's great.
And a cameo from Francis Ford Coppola as a director.
Yeah, which I think was because they were struggling to find like English speaking actors. There was a story behind it, and Francis Ford Coppola was like, "No, just do it."
Yeah,
it's him and its cinematographer. It's
just in one of the most like weirdly fourth wall breaking like cameos. I almost was like, it felt strange when I watched it, like to see him be like, "Don't look at the camera, carry on," like as if you're fighting, as if you. And I was like, this is very, very odd just to see the actual filmmaker telling the actor to do that on camera.
Yeah, and it's sort of like breaking down the idea of just like the whole Vietnam War, is that there was, and I think those characters, because they come in with such a sense of like machismo, like they're very like, we're gonna surf and listen to rock and roll and like get babes, and they like crash into this other country, just the like complete and utter recklessness of their actions. And so I think it's like, I don't know, it's like they're really performing like their Americanness in a way of being like, hey, we're America, we're here, we do these things. And so I think having Francis Ford Coppola with the camera at that moment feels really significant. It's kind of going, yeah, what you're doing, is that really the truth? Is that who you really are as a person, or is that who you think you are as a person and what you want to like perform for the world?
And what about Brando?
I mean, this is the thing. I feel like there's a lot of negativity around his performance in this, because there's all these stories about him turning up to the set like completely unprepared, and he was being a fuss, and he was, you know,
that sounds like all the stories about Brando.
But this is the thing, I was reading about it, and actually if you look at the notes, and like this is the story that Francis Ford Coppola tells about him being unprepared, but if you look at the notes, like he had read the book, like he had a lot of opinions on the character, and he did contribute to the script in meaningful ways. I think he really did care about Kurtz and about delivering that performance, and I think his performance is incredible because of just how terrifying he is. And that's the thing, he is mostly in the shadows, but that to me, it's
and
like,
it's a 2-hour build-up as well.
Yeah.
It's a 2-hour build-up to meeting him, and it isn't a disappointing reveal either. It's after that long of stretching out the tension and being like, okay, who is this? Because it feels like you're about to meet the devil.
Yeah, and that is kind of who he is. Like this sort of ancient god, primitive, primordial figure, and he's always hunched over, and he's got shaved heads, and he's always, you know, Brando mumbling things about like apocalypses and civilization burning down, and yeah, I can't imagine anyone else being that frightening on such a intense base level.
I'm going to give Apocalypse Now, I think, the 3 points because of mostly Martin Sheen. I think that acting is reacting, and that's understated a lot of the time. And he, throughout the entire film, is just, his face never looks like he's not involved in what's going on and actually reacting to the things that we're seeing around it. I'm then going to give it 2 points to Saving Private Ryan, Tom Hanks, and 1 point to The Hurt Locker, although I do think that the camaraderie between Anthony Mackie and Jeremy Renner's character is particularly very, very good. So at the moment, Saving Private Ryan and Apocalypse Now have 5 points each, and The Hurt Locker has 2 points. Round 3 is Memorable Scene, and I'm going to come straight to Paul for, I assume we're talking about the opening scene.
No, we're talking about the letter typing scene where all the secretaries are typing. I'm just kidding. We're talking about the opening. What an opening. And what works about it, I think, really well is that you know where they have to go to, and you follow them as they go towards it. So it's a real journey for you as an audience member as well. Whereas the way that other films, you know, it's shot over their shoulders almost. And the way that the other films are shot, I don't really feel like there's a scene in them where you kind of go it through a charge with the characters. Whereas this, the way the camera works as well, there's a lot of shaky cam in it, and at points you feel like you're a soldier with them, and that works especially well when you go under the water.
Dizzying.
Yeah, exactly, because you're bobbing up and down under the waves as well, and then when you hit the sand, you kind of join Tom Hanks as he takes a moment of just complete shell shock and looks around him, and you're very much fixated from his point of view as well, and they do such a good job of capturing the perspective of people going through this charge, and it works so well of just constantly catching you off guard, so there isn't a dull moment in it, and you just feel it completely bearing down on you. And then when they do get a moment at the end where they breathe a sigh of relief, you just say, wow, this has been non-stop. It's been completely relentless. It's very traumatic. I can totally understand why people have PTSD from this. At the opening scene, I was reading today, there was actually veterans who couldn't finish that scene when they watched it in the cinema, and they just had to get up and walk out because it just recaptured that feeling of storming the beach so well. And
this is what I'm talking about. Like, and obviously, our generation have never experienced anything like that. But just getting a glimpse, watching something like that is just like, nah. I can barely even watch this in a Hollywood-made film. I can't even imagine what it would be like. The fear that you'd feel when you're like on those boats, being like, all right, I guess me and my friends might die now. It's just horrid.
Yeah,
and it captures that feeling.
The sound design is absolutely incredible on it as well. It holds up really, really well in terms of just the way everything, the even throughout the film, the way that the rain hits the water, it kind of transforms into bullet sounds hitting things, and it's just so relentless, and you just feel for these characters going through it, and it does feel like a real gut punch watching it happen.
What really gets me about that scene is the claustrophobia, because like the choice to do Omaha Beach, because I know the other beaches, it wasn't quite the same. They weren't hitting this wall of defense, and it's so frightening when they reach that level, you know, with the sandbank, and they realize that like no one else has made it, and there's nowhere else to go but forward is like where death is. And I find that particular moment the most frightening.
Yeah.
It's like
you can't turn around.
Yeah, you can't turn around.
As soon as that door goes down,
yeah,
it's either charge or stay where you are and get killed.
Yep. Joe, what are you picking from the Hurt Locker?
Yeah, that's such a tough scene, and I thought that would be probably the best action scene out of the three movies. So I went with a completely opposite direction, and I think one of the most memorable scenes for me is what you alluded to earlier, Jack, is the cereal aisle scene.
Oh, mate, that is the thing that sticks out to me more than anything in this film. It is overwhelming, this shot.
I mean, after Jeremy Renner's finished his tour in Iraq, he heads home to his wife and child, and he's just doing everyday things, cleaning the gutters, getting cereal, cooking with his wife, and he's just there talking to her, telling her war stories, and you can just tell by her face that this isn't like a just today thing. This is him every day, all day, talking about war, talking about the thing he loves the most. And then it just, there's a deep sadness in me when I see him. It's another father and son moment. This is going to be a thing where everyone's like, Joe's going for a father and son moment, where he's talking to...
Maybe you'll get a little bonus point every time you bring up a father and son thing.
He's talking to his son, and he says to his son that the older you get, there's less and less things you fall in love with or that you love. And like basically for him right now, there's only one. And in the next scene, you see him walking back into war, going back on another tour. And I'm just like, that is like, it's heartbreaking. And it's crazy to me. Mm-hmm. Just that in all of these movies, all three of these movies, you're going to find all the soldiers don't want to be where they're at in those moments, but he is the one guy who needs that to survive.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's that cereal aisle is the shot that I remember, and it's specifically the amount of choice he has, and the amount of it's just doing normal stuff and he doesn't know how to be there. Like, it doesn't make sense to him. he's been there for so long that like the way he lives now, just to me that's what it felt like seeing him in that aisle. It was like I'm not used to having this much choice, and this just seems almost absurd to me. Like why is there this much to choose from? And I think that Catherine Bigelow does that very well. And I'm not the biggest fan of Zero Dark 30, but I think that there's some good stuff. And specifically, it's like when Jessica Chastain at the end of that film cries after they've got Osama bin Laden. Feels very similar to The Hurt Locker. It's like, what do I do now? Yeah. It's that desperation of like the thing that meant the most to me is now gone. It's finished. But yeah, the tragedy of The Hurt Locker is that he chooses to go back and leave what most of us would consider to be
home.
Yeah.
It's like to be slightly critical of The Hurt Locker, like the thing with Catherine Bigelow is that she's so good at the psychology of it. But then I feel like she goes in so close to these characters that when you're trying to put those movies in the sort of wider war genre, like you don't get much sense of context, because that's the thing I always walk away from The Hurt Locker with, because it's such a good portrait of one man. And this isn't really a critique, but just like a thing to say that compared to Saving Private Ryan and Apocalypse Now, it's so intimate that you never really get a wider picture of like, what is this war? Why are we fighting it?
And
like any
that's
of those
why
questions.
I think it's even better than those other movies, because for Jeremy Renner's character, the reason why they're at war is irrelevant. He just needs war. That's what he needs. So whoever's politics it is of why we're doing this and why we're that. And for some soldiers, I believe that is they just need, they're signing up. They're enlisting to protect their country for whatever reason. And what Catherine Bigelow is showing us is that it doesn't matter what reason you're here for. Like this is what it is. This is what you're tasked to do.
Sort of reminds me of, because it's more of a character study, isn't it? It sort of reminds me of when we were talking on the boxing episode a few episodes ago, is like Raging Bull is not a boxing movie. It's like it's about a boxer and why he specifically chooses to do this. And that's what I think The Hurt Locker is kind of doing. It sort of feels similar. It's just exploring one particular character's point of view through this awful thing that he seems to be addicted to. Clarisse, which of the scenes in the 3 hours... I mean, first of all, does Apocalypse Now need to be that long? Does it need to be that long?
I watched the 3-hour version.
And they made it longer.
Yeah, made it 3 hours and 40 or something at some point. I don't know what he's doing.
I think, like, I don't know. I mean, people are going to disagree with me on this, but I think for a film like Apocalypse Now, like, the exhaustion of it is kind of part of the film, and I don't think emotionally it would be as effective if it was just like a neat little like 90 minute trip up the river.
I don't mean 90 minutes, but I mean there seems to be some parts of it, and we'll get onto the specifics of what scene you want to talk about, but there seems to be some parts of it that are like, I get it, and I'm gonna get told off for that as well, but like I feel like sometimes it borders into the indulgence of it rather than, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with myself as I'm saying.
I think you're semi making a point I agree with, in the fact that Francis Ford Coppola as a filmmaker, he is kind of like that, and not indulgent in like a self-indulgent, so great, but he really sort of relishes moments. And I think like sometimes it films with like Dracula, like I'm not a huge Dracula fan because it's just like, it's just too much. It's too much sometimes. But I think for Apocalypse Now, it's what that film needed, because it needed to feel like this endless slog of brutality, and you needed to feel like the extremity of the emotions, because this is something that the cinematographer kept saying when I was researching this. Like, it's about the beauty and the horror. And you need these two extremes to make sense of war, because it's about the beauty in terms of like how the men idealize themselves and idealize their mission and idealize what they're doing, versus the brutality of war. And I guess that leads well into the scene that I picked, which is unsurprisingly the helicopter scene, the Ride of Valkyries, which is like, I mean, we'll get to cultural influences, is just one of the most famous scenes ever, and has just been endlessly copied over and over and over again.
It's just when the music stops as well. It's when it suddenly stops. It's when they're doing it. So I'll let you do this. I'm taking
Yeah,
the point.
no, because I was going to add to that. I think it's the music stopping is so interesting because it goes back to the idea that it's like all about the performance of what they're doing. Like it's such a momentary thing because they're in the helicopter and they're going to bomb this village basically so they can watch a guy surf. Like it's so, the whole idea around it is so barbaric. But in that moment, like they just think they are the toughest shit, the great invaders, the do-gooders there, the rock and rollers, like.
Well, it sort of fits with what Brando talks about later about making making friends with horror. The idea that like these guys seem to be like, well, we can, so we will, and because we know we can get away with it, we're just going to do that so that we can have some time to surf.
Yeah,
and that's the absurdity of it. Like we're going to bomb this village so we can surf because we can. And I think that even the opening image, which is just the bombs going off in the trees, I don't think it's... I mean, I know that war films kind of, by their very nature, are glorifying war in a way, because it's showing it... Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, well, this is interesting, because Francis Ford Coppola has actually talked about this, because he said that he does not believe that Apocalypse Now is an anti-war film, because... Like, no, he wouldn't consider any of the films we're talking about today an anti-war film because he was saying the second that you depict the violence, it does glorify it to some extent. And to truly make an anti-war film, it would have to be something that is purely about peace and joy and happiness. That's what an anti-war film is to him. And I do kind of agree with him. And that's the thing I've always had with war films is that it's so hard. It's so hard because the second you depict ideas of heroism and you depict the violence, it's like even without intending it, you can slip towards glorifying it.
I mean, it's even what I just said about the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan. Like, it's horrific and it puts you in the middle of it. But then also it's like, haha, that guy got shot in the head after he took his helmet off.
And
do you know what I mean?
They made a Call of Duty game and they made Medal of Honor. So clearly some people like... do I don't know see some sort of glorifying of heroism in it, and I think that's sort of true of Hurt Locker as well. And again, these aren't critiques. I think
that's what Hurt Locker tackles almost, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
the glorification of war and how a character has sort of become addicted to that. The feeling of release that he gets from detonating bombs and surviving, coming that close to death, and. Yeah, I feel like every film in this list could be seen as glorifying war in some ways, depending on whether you interpret it well or not. Like, you could see that scene with the helicopter as, if you're American, being like, yeah, USA kind of moment where, you know, America's going out all guns blazing and really stamping down on people that are opposites to their ideals. And I think these films can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. But just with Apocalypse Now, I just think Apocalypse, is it over now? Because it's been going on for about 3 hours. And I've been waiting to do that joke.
How long have you been waiting to make that joke?
Yeah. But Apocalypse Now is 3 hours long, but so is Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
And
couldn't they save him a bit faster?
Yeah, they feel like very different times anyway.
Well, I went to that fake Ryan the first time, played by Nathan Fillion, and you're like, oh, they've finally got Ryan. We're an hour in, they're wrapping it up.
Get my bags.
Yeah.
Peace out, Ryan. Let's go.
Yeah.
Is everyone like just fine with the plot of Saving Private Ryan? Like,
what do you mean?
This mother's lost 3 sons. We must
Like
save the fourth because
would.
he's more important than everybody else.
It's a very American fictionalized story, isn't it?
This is the thing about Steven Spielberg, that he's such a humanist, I guess that would be the right word. That
it's very sentimental.
Yeah, and it's both Saving Private Ryan's greatest strength and its weakness, because he wouldn't be able to do that opening scene if he didn't care so deeply about the pain and the suffering.
Joe, the end line that you just said as well, like the earn it, like when he dies. I was like, it almost felt, it read a bit cringy now.
There's so much corn going everywhere when that happened. I was like, oh.
It works as a metaphor for war, because how many soldiers have died just for one person to have a normal life? Like, you think about all the people that died in the war. I think there was about 50 million casualties altogether just to save, you know, never have so many sacrificed so much for so few. And Ryan sort of almost personifies that.
Yeah, what a great little discussion, guys. I'm just going to quickly give out some points. this is my least favorite part now because you've made such great points. Again, this show is getting harder and harder every time. I'm going to give Saving Private Ryan 3 points, Apocalypse Now 2 points, and The Hurt Locker 1 point, even though I love all of them.
I
hate this bit.
I feel like you're in the Hurt Locker giving these points out.
So right now, Saving Private Ryan is in the lead with 8 points. Apocalypse Now has 7 points, and The Hurt Locker has 3 points.
Jeremy Renner is not going to be happy, I tell you that.
It's all right. He'll be in another Avengers movie.
Yeah, Anthony Mackie as well, Falcon.
Yeah. The two of them
Everyone
just
in
before.
that movie was an because Guy Pearce,
Yes.
Evangeline Lilly.
Yes, they're all
did
pre-Marvel.
Kevin Feige just
Just
loves
looked at
The
The
Hurt
Hurt
Locker.
Locker. Yeah.
He was looking for the
All
best
of
war
them.
movie and took the whole cast.
Okay, the next round is craft. So this is a moment where we can talk about anything to do with the filmmaking, whether it be the directing all the way to the catering, if you want, if you know anything about that. So we're
I
going to go
do not.
to Joe first
All
with The Hurt Locker.
With craft, I went with directing with Catherine Bigelow. She got the Academy Award for Best Director the first
Still
time.
the only woman to win Best
Still.
Director at the Oscars.
Still, which,
Sort it out.
which
Fingers crossed, not for long.
which I thought was great. I think what she brings to this movie in her directing is what we've alluded to earlier on in the show. Is just a level of person. Like this movie is so personal, not just from like the character we're following, but from the way it's directed, the shots that she has where Jeremy Renner's in the bomber suit and we go to the first person view where we're seeing what he sees. The opening scene where we're with the staff sergeant who dies and one of the soldiers sees the guy at the meat locker with the phone and he's running over and he looks through his scope and it goes to that first person view. And these are things that are done in video games as well.
Isn't it just like when you're looking through that scope, can't you just hear like the breath?
Yeah, you can hear the breathing.
Yeah.
You can hear there's 2 breaths and then like you can just, it's like there's so little going on, but there's also so much, and it puts you legitly in that mind of the soldier. And I feel like this is where, as a war movie, I like it more than anything else because it makes you feel like you're on the ground with them,
and it makes you wait as well.
boots.
Like with that, when they're trapped, that's the tension in that scene is incredible because they make you wait with them, and while they're being watched that entire time. And I love Catherine Bigelow's sort of documentary-esque style.
Yeah.
It really, really puts you in it. It feels like they are just observing a real event that happened, and obviously it did in a way happen, and but like she's capturing it as if it's real.
Yeah, she does lots of stuff with purpose-built cameras and handheld stuff to make sure that you get that vibe of like just being so enclosed and personal to what they're shooting. And I feel like this even plays to the bigger role of what Clarisse mentioned earlier, that it doesn't give you the bigger scope of what's going on around. It's just we're narrowly focused on right here and we're in this moment. And I feel that she builds up tension in every scene with just how it's shot and how it's directed. And I just love that about the movie.
I think that the directing in all 3 of these actually really emphasizes subjectivity. Like what you were just saying about the point of view angles, there's a lot of that in Apocalypse Now. And I don't think there's many POV angles specifically in Saving Private Ryan, but it absolutely is putting you in there with them and giving you it's keeping you with Tom Hanks and those guys and on the ground with them the entire time, and you feel and go through what they go through. So yeah, I think that's a big thing for all these war movies. Paul, what are you going for in Saving Private Ryan? What in the craft speaks to you?
So I think Spielberg is one of the best of all time.
Is he?
And by far, yeah. Have you not heard of the guy before? Have you not watched it?
I've sort of heard it around the block a few times.
Yeah, so he's good, isn't he? And I tell you what, he lost to lost Best Picture to Shakespeare in Love.
Shakespeare in Love.
What are they doing?
That was a campaign by He Who Will Not Be Named.
Yeah, not a good that for films. I don't feel if that was the Best Picture, but he just combines all of his styles in this. You've got his vast cinematic ones that kind of show a soldier standing against a field, and you just kind of get the width and breadth of the location. And then you've got the absolutely insane moments where he's just going crazy with a shaky cam and following these soldiers over their shoulder. and he manages to do both really well. Now, The Hurt Locker does one style really well, I feel, and Apocalypse Now sort of does another style really well, but Spielberg, I feel, does them both to very, very successful ends.
It's even the way that Spielberg, it's his very Spielberg way of telling stories sometimes.
Yeah.
Like the woman going outside of the house to find out that her sons have died and just seeing her collapse, and you don't even need to have any dialogue there.
Exactly.
It's stuff that only Spielberg really does.
Yeah, and he's so, by this point, he was so accomplished as a director, and everything he tries, he nails. There's not really a scene in this film that I think fails. And you know, 1917 does it really well as well, where you kind of follow these characters through different environments and see the different, you've got your towns, you've got your fields, you've got your bases, you've got your soldier camps, and you've got your ambushes. And Spielberg does that as well, where you go through from the beach to the fields to the French town where Vin Diesel is. You also have different scenarios where there's snipers or there's soldiers in trenches, and it's just all put together really well. You can tell he looked at different battles throughout the war and said, how do I make this into one cohesive story? And it doesn't ever feel forced at any point. You're not ticking things off like, oh well, this is the bit where they make the soldier dig his own grave, that old scene from the movie. This is the bit where they kind of sit about and talk about things. It's just really well done.
So both of you have gone for directing, and that makes sense because both of these films also won the Academy Award for Best Director. Clarisse, what are you got? It's got to be the cinematography.
Yeah, so Vittorio Storaro was a cinematographer, and what I love about him is that he tells a story that he turned up to the set of Apocalypse Now. He'd come off something fairly low budget, and he turned up with very basic equipment.
He was more prepared than Brando.
Yeah, he rocked up to the set hey, I've got this little thing and this little thing, and the fact that he did that and then still managed to create some of the most beautiful hallucinogenic things that I have ever seen on film.
I genuinely think it may be one of the most gorgeous, in terms of overall. There's not a particular shot in it that stands out. Everything in it is immense. It looks incredible. It's one of the most beautifully choreographed and lensed and photographed pieces of work I think I've ever seen. And the way that it dances with everything, sometimes it feels like how did they not do this with CGI? Sometimes it just feels impossible.
Yeah, considering everything that was going on that set, people having heart attacks and seizures and helicopters suddenly disappearing to go fight insurgents. It was, we can get to that later, notoriously disastrous set. And the fact that Vittorio right in the middle of all this was just lensing some of the most beautiful stuff ever. And what I love particularly, he said that he wanted to create the contrast between artificial light and natural light. And so the constant sort of battle, I guess, between the artificiality of the American soldiers and they those colored, I don't know what they actually are. They flares that they keep pulling off.
I'm not even sure exactly what they are either.
Yeah, they keep setting off these colored flares and creating this sort of rainbow pattern, which seems really beautiful. But then often it's right in the background, there's a bunch of bodies or something horrific. A massacre has happened, and it's that constant contrast between, oh my God, I'm trying to take in two different emotions at the same time, which is, again, it's the beauty and the horror.
So I watched Apocalypse Now very recently, and I haven't really researched it much at all. It's always been one of these films that I never got round to do it before this show. And I was watching it and I immediately interpreted, this feels like the journey into the underworld. And I don't think they're being shy about that. I don't think that's me being clever and picking up.
I've spotted
it. I think it's very clear that they're not going, this is not a Hurt Locker or Saving Private Ryan. It's not a direct, realistic adaptation of what war feels like. It felt to me more like I was experiencing someone's memory and trauma of what war felt like, and the flashes of the memory that was there was this bit where soldiers were in the water, and then there was this bit where this, and it just felt like a montage of all of it happening at once. And I think that's what they managed to capture.
True, although I think like the one thing to keep in mind is that this is the Vietnam War, and a big part of that conflict was the chaos, the absolute chaos that this wasn't like World War, this wasn't Omaha Beach of like, okay, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this. It was just like,
it wasn't an operation,
blind massacring and atrocity, and all of it hidden in the jungle. No one really knew what was happening, and so I think in that sense, like, you're totally right, it is a completely surreal like memory trip, but I think the choice to do that is so appropriate for the subject that they're covering.
All right, I'm going to give out some points now. And again, I hate this because you've all argued so well, and the movies are clearly both beautifully directed and beautifully shot. I'm just going to have to go with my gut. I'm going to give Apocalypse Now 3 points because the cinematography is unlike anything I've ever seen. And there's some things where older movies look like older movies, and this just doesn't. This looks like it could have been shot this year with CGI, and yet it's not. And I think that's just incredible. And then I'm going to give it to the Hurt Locker. I'm going to give 2 points to the Hurt Locker and a single point to Saving Private Ryan.
Well, you better hope Steven Spielberg doesn't watch this.
I just think that.
Tell you that one.
Because the Hurt Locker did it on a smaller budget and it is a more specific sort of character look.
Don't tell me, tell Steven.
All right, have you got him? Is he next to you?
He's
just out of frame.
A baseball cap just rises out.
So currently, Apocalypse Now is 1 point ahead with 10 points, and Saving Private Ryan has 9 points, and the Hurt Locker has 5 points. Okay, so the final round is cultural impact. So how is it that your film has affected the rest of the world of cinema, if at all? And I'm going to start with the most obvious one, with Clarisse. How has Apocalypse Now affected the world of cinema?
Well, you can tell it was influential because it was referenced in Beverly Hills Chihuahua. Just give me the 3 points. Let's end this.
Okay. Joe?
No, wait, no. I mean, I think the thing with Apocalypse Now is that it wrote a whole new kind of film language, which was like the language of the Vietnam War. And obviously you've seen that both in like further films down the line, like stuff like Platoon is obviously heavily influenced by Apocalypse Now. But also I think if you look at movies like Kong Skull Island, I mean, that's just Apocalypse Now. But
Tropic Thunder, but comedy.
Tropic Thunder. I mean, it sort of set the template of like, right, you're gonna have like the Doors playing every single time. You've got the helicopters riding into the sunset. You've got like, I don't know, you've got like the characters all driven to mad. It's this set template that's been repeated over and over again. I went onto IMDb and I was looking at the list of the number of times Apocalypse Now has been referenced in other movies. And I started scrolling, and I think I didn't stop scrolling for like 5 minutes. I just couldn't see the bottom of that list because that's how just influential it is.
I think
everyone
the line,
knows that scene.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning is like, it's as iconic as something like you can't handle the truth. Like, even if you haven't seen it, you know the line, and you might not even know where it's from.
Even if you don't know what napalm is.
Yeah.
People are just like children are repeating it. It's like, do you know what this is that you're saying? Like, you're just saying things. Like, I think that's the interesting thing about it. It's like both on the superficial, like pop culture level, it's just blown up in a huge way, but also on a filmmaking level, you're constantly seeing people go back to Apocalypse Now to sort of go, okay, right, how do we depict war
Madness.
again?
Yeah, how do we
and
do
madness
this?
and war and brutality. Oh yeah, like how Francis Ford Coppola did. Okay, let's just do that.
Paul?
It's completely changed the landscape of, I think, media in general. Saving Private Ryan, after its release, there was a huge resurgence in interest for World War II after that film got released, and this went across from video games to documentaries. There's even full channels just dedicated to discussing things about the Second World War, and I think they're cashing in a lot on the hype behind Saving Private Ryan because it just came out and put this, in the same way that there's been a couple of films recently that have brought back the First World War in a lot of people's minds. Saving Private Ryan did that for the Second World War, and it's been copied in so many video games.
For movies, it almost felt like, why bother?
Yeah, exactly. And just Steven Spielberg, he's a master when it comes to the medium. And for him to go from Indiana Jones to then Schindler's List to then this, you can see why it was just stacking up awards, because it's so well made. And I think a lot of people kind of Second World War movies, especially in the early 2000s, like Enemy at the Gates and so on, they all kind of looked at this for the template of how to really lay things out. And it's just down to how well it handles every single scenario that these characters are put into. Now, I don't know if it's been referenced in Beverly Hills Chihuahua or not, but it's top dog, I think, when it comes to...
Nice job.
I got dog puns, mate. I got them.
Joe, I mean, we've already mentioned the fact that every cast member is now...
An Avenger.
An Avenger.
The only other thing I would say besides that is, obviously, I feel like this is an uphill battle, but I feel like maybe the cultural impact for The Hurt Locker hasn't been seen yet. Obviously, Catherine Bigelow, first female winner of the Directors Award. And I feel like...
I mean, that's significant.
I feel like that has opened the door for, you know, directors in the future, female directors in the future, to get the award. And I feel like maybe 10, 20 years from now, we'll look back and be like, Catherine Bigelow made this possible for everyone else later on down the line.
Okay, I'm going to give the final points. I think it's going to have to be top marks to Saving Private Ryan, and then Apocalypse Now, and then The Hurt Locker. So that means that the finishing marks are Hurt Locker with 6 points, Apocalypse Now, and Saving Private Ryan are still neck and neck with 12 points each, which means that we've got a tiebreaker. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put 30 seconds on the clock.
Oh, no.
And you're going to each have that time to give me your final pitch as to why I should give you that final point.
Beverly Hills Chihuahua.
And Joe, I'm going to ask for your help on this. I think you and I should team up and decide who we think we should give the prestigious Screen Test Award, who we should give it to. Okay, so I think Clarisse is very nervous, so I'm going to let her go second. Do you want to go second?
Time stresses me out. I'm sorry.
Okay, so Paul, 30 seconds. You ready?
Let's go.
Alexa, set a timer for 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Starting now.
So Apocalypse Now, it's very much centered around the horror of war, and it doesn't really deal that much with the humanity of it, whereas Saving Private Ryan, it deals with that humanity and that horror, and it layers it in a film that makes you really see things from the soldier's point of view and the reason behind why they were giving their lives for the people back home, just so they could have some sense of normality. Apocalypse Now, great film, well made, nice cinematography, very, very long though, and not as entertaining, I don't feel.
That's your time.
Right, why are we doing diss? I didn't realize we were doing diss track.
I just went off on one, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Set a timer for 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Starting now.
Right, since we're apparently going negative on this, then I guess we're going to go negative. Saving Private Ryan, the opening sequence, the storming of the beach, quite rightly one of the greatest film sequences of all time.
You said it.
But I would argue the rest of the film, and we've kind of touched on this, is very much rooted in ideas of like American fantasy, what we want heroism to look like. Apocalypse Now is the brutal reality. I know it's surreal. I know it's about being inside someone's mind, but it's really tackling ideas of like, what is war? Why do people go to war? And what happens in war? What drives people to brutality? This is why I'm so bad at this stuff. I'm sorry.
No, that was great. Okay. Very well argued. I wasn't expecting you both to just go at each other.
Well, I wasn't going to, but I was like, if it's going to be a fully anti-apocalypse Now, I feel like I
kind of agree with what Clarisse is saying. I think that after a while, Saving Private Ryan sort of meanders, but then again,
it's a movie.
So does Apocalypse Now. I think the first hour of both of those films are great, and then it just takes a while to get there. Okay, Joe, what are you thinking?
I'm gonna have to go Clarisse, because I feel like her argument that Saving Private Ryan, great starting, and then it's like American fantasy, and hers is the real actualization of what's happening in someone's mind. I feel like that stands. That kind of works for me.
Yeah. I agree.
But it's a movie.
Spoilers.
It's meant to be entertaining as well.
Well, come on now. You've had your time.
Sometimes movies are meant to make you feel bad.
I'm not the judge, so
Yeah, you're
I'm
not.
just
But
throwing
I think
that out there.
that's a good. I'm sort of leaning towards that, but I think Saving Private Ryan is the fan favorite, and that makes me want to go the other way. So I'm going to award it to Saving Private Ryan.
The Beverly Hills Chihuahua is so disappointed in you.
Devastated.
So Paul,
Thank you.
I'm going to hand you the Screen Test Award through time and space.
Amazing.
Are you ready?
Hmm.
Here we go. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Where are you going to keep it?
In the bin.
Brilliant. Okay, now it's time for my favourite part of the show. It's Unbox The Plot. In this box, I have some clues to one of my favourite war movies, and I need you to try and guess what that movie is based on the 4 clues. Once you've committed your answer to your whiteboard, you can't go back. So the earlier you guess, like if you both get the same answer, like if you and Clarisse get the same guess, but you guess on an earlier point, you win. You understand?
Okay.
All right, here we go. Let's unbox the plot. Unbox the plot. Unbox the plot.
I'd say it's actually been delivered by Amazon.
Okay, the first clue is apple strudel. It's a box of apple strudel, everybody. Anybody going to commit an answer to a whiteboard on the first clue? Anyone going to be brave enough for that?
I'm
No.
thinking.
No.
All right, I'm going on to the second clue.
Could you call that apple strudel an American pie by any chance, or an apple pie?
No, it is apple strudel.
Okay.
It's very much
American
apple
Pie
strudel.
is also not a war film.
Depends who you ask.
We've got.
Oh my god, I know
Oh.
what it. Okay, show the next clue, but I'm pretty sure I know what it is.
Well, no, the next clue hasn't come out yet.
Do I go for it?
Go for it. I think you should go for it, Clarisse.
I
I
think
really am
I'm-
rooting for you.
If you get it in one,
Apple
you
strudel.
should do it.
Okay. The next clue is a napkin with a lipstick mark on it.
Oh yeah.
Clarisse is confident.
If I get it wrong now, it's gonna be so embarrassing.
It's signed from an actress called Bridget. I'm not going to say the full name because I think it will give it away, but it's for somebody called Max, and it's signed from an actress called Bridget. Little kiss on a napkin.
I don't think I've seen this movie.
The third clue is a bloody baseball bat.
Okay, I've 100% got this right.
Well done, Clarisse. Proud
I
of
don't think
you.
I've seen it. I think
You
it's
don't
gonna be
think
a
you've seen this,
spoiler for
Paul?
heavy
I-
spoilers.
Genuinely, Paul, I think you have seen
I
this.
think I've
You
seen
just-
it.
you
I've
just-
put my guess
everyone's
down as well.
probably
I
seen
don't.
this.
I would be surprised if you hadn't seen this. And the final clue are some names that people would wear on their head to play a game of what's this game called? Where you stick the names on your head and you try and guess what it is. Whatever that is. King Kong is one. Anybody? Paul, you no?
No idea.
Okay, Clarisse, since you did the first guess, what do you think it is?
It's Inglorious Bastards.
It's Inglorious
Of course
Bastards.
it is.
Did you get it as well, Joe?
I also had Inglorious Bastards.
Which
Yeah.
clue did you get it on, Joe?
The baseball bat.
Okay, and Clarisse, you got it on the first
The
one.
strudel.
The
Because I
strudel.
suddenly remembered.
Paul, you
that
have seen it?
He eats the
Yeah.
strudel.
Of course I have.
Yeah.
And you know what the annoying thing is?
Yeah.
I actually went on your YouTube channel before and looked at your most popular videos, and one of the highest viewed ones was you breaking down the body language behind Inglorious Bastards.
Yeah, it is. Thanks for the plug.
And I should have seen that and thought that's his favourite war movie, but I didn't.
It was Inglorious Bastards, and you too can watch that on Prime Video right now, along with loads of other great war movies. Let me know which ones you've been watching down in the comments below, and whether you think that Saving Private Ryan did deserve to be crowned the best war film of all time. We'll be back next week when we'll be swapping the big screen for the small screen with me, Clarisse, and Joe. We'll be trying to figure out what the best sitcom ever made is, along with Humza Arshad. So subscribe and make sure notifications are turned on so you don't miss it, and we'll see you then. Goodbye. Jazz hands.